My father thought he could buy his life with my sister's beauty. But when the most feared man in the city walked into our living room, he didn't look at her. He pulled his weapon, aimed it straight at my chest, and said, "I don't want the porcelain doll. I want her. In the Gallagher household, your worth was measured by two things, your bank account and your waistline. I, Madeline Gallagher, possessed neither. I was the secret the family preferred to keep in the kitchen or hidden away in the upstairs study. At a size 20, with soft, thick curves and an unapologetic roundness to my face, I was the antithesis of the Gallagher aesthetic. My father, Richard Gallagher, was a man who traded on appearances. He was the CEO of Gallagher Freight, a Boston-based shipping empire that looked magnificent on paper, but was rotting from the inside out. And then there was my younger sister Serafina. Sarah was the golden child, a flawless size 2, with cascading blonde hair, high cheekbones, and a fragile doe-eyed look that made men want to empty their wallets just to see her smile. Growing up, my father made his preferences painfully clear. Sarah was given designer dresses, horseback riding lessons, and debutante balls. I was given gym memberships I never asked for, cruel diet plans, and the silent, unspoken job of running the household, and eventually my father's cooking books while remaining entirely invisible. "Madeline, for God's sake, don't stand in the light. You're casting a shadow over the entire room." My father snapped, adjusting his bespoke suit in the reflection of our antique foyer mirror. He was sweating profusely, the scent of expensive cologne masking the sour stench of pure terror. "I'm just putting out the glasses, Dad," I murmured, setting the crystal tumblers on the mahogany sideboard. My hands were trembling, though I tried to hide it. Tonight was not a normal dinner party. Tonight the devil was coming to collect. Over the past 3 years, my father's desperate attempts to keep his failing business afloat had led him into the dark underbelly of Boston's criminal syndicates. He had borrowed $15 million from the Delgado family. They weren't a bank. They didn't do payment plans, and they certainly didn't care about the global supply chain crisis. They cared about their money, and the head of the family, Roman Delgado, had run out of patience. Roman wasn't just a mob boss. He was an executioner in a tailored suit. The rumors about him were the kind that made grown men lock their doors and pray. They said he took over his father's empire at 25 by systematically wiping out a rival crew in broad daylight, leaving 0 witnesses and 0 evidence. He was ruthless cold and entirely unpredictable. And tonight, my father had a plan to pay him back. He didn't have the $15 million. What he had was Serafina. Sarah was standing near the fireplace, shivering in a silk emerald-green slip dress that clung to her fragile frame. Her makeup was done to perfection, emphasizing a tearful, vulnerable beauty. "Dad, I can't do this," Sarah whimpered, hugging her thin arms. "You can't just give me to him. He's a monster. He kills people, Dad." Richard marched over, grabbing her by the shoulders. "You will do exactly as I say, Serafina. I have clothed you, fed you, and pampered you your entire life. Now it is your turn to save this family. Roman Delgado is a man, and men, no matter how ruthless, like beautiful things. You are going to smile, you are going to be compliant, and you are going to agree to whatever he asks. Do you understand?" "But he's going to hurt me," she cried. "He is going to marry you." My father hissed, his face red. "A union between our family and his. It wipes the debt and gives him a respectable high society wife. It's the only card I have left to play." I stood by the sideboard, clutching a linen napkin, my heart aching for her, despite how terribly she usually treated me. I was the fat, ugly duckling, but I wasn't heartless. "Dad, maybe there's another way." I spoke up, my voice quiet but firm. I've been looking at the offshore accounts. If we liquidate the South Boston warehouses and— Shut up, Madeline, my father roared, turning his venom on me. I don't want to hear a word out of your mouth tonight. You are only here to pour the whiskey. Look at you. Look at this situation. Do you think Roman Delgado cares about warehouse liquidations? You think he wants to negotiate with a fat, miserable accountant? No. He wants a prize. He looked me up and down with deep, unfiltered disgust. I was wearing a simple, dark navy dress that I thought flattered my heavy hips, but under his gaze, I felt like a grotesque monster. Stay in the corner, he ordered. Don't speak unless spoken to, and for God's sake, hold your stomach in. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood, forcing the tears back. This was my life. The invisible workhorse. The eyesore. Suddenly the heavy brass knocker on our front door echoed through the silent house. It didn't sound like a knock. It sounded like the tolling of a bell. Sarah let out a muffled sob. My father paled, swallowing hard before marching to the door. I retreated to the darkest corner of the dining room, practically pressing my back against the silk wallpaper, hoping the shadows would swallow me whole. The door swung open. Roman Delgado stepped into the light. If the devil walked the earth, he did it in a charcoal Tom Ford suit. Roman Delgado was devastatingly intimidating. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, and lean, moving with the terrifying silent grace of a predator. His hair was dark and swept back, his jaw sharp and dusted with a shadow of stubble, but it was his eyes that froze the blood in my veins. They were the color of slate-cold flat and entirely devoid of human empathy. He didn't walk in alone. He was flanked by 3 massive men, but the one directly at his right shoulder, a scarred, burly man named Jasper, was clearly his second in command. Roman. My father said, his voice cracking slightly. He wiped his sweaty palm on his trousers before offering it forward. Welcome to my home. Please come in. Roman did not take my father's hand. He stepped past him, his dark eyes sweeping the opulent room. He took in the crystal chandeliers, the Persian rugs, the grand piano. He was calculating the cost of everything, weighing it against the $15 million my father had stolen from him. Richard. Roman's voice was a low, gravelly baritone that vibrated in the chest. It was calm. Too calm. You have a beautiful home. It's a shame you're going to lose it tonight. Now let's not be hasty, my father stammered, closing the door and rushing to keep up with Roman as he strode into the living room. I told you on the phone I have a proposition, an arrangement that will more than satisfy the debt. Jasper let out a dark, mocking chuckle, but Roman simply stood in the center of the room, radiating an oppressive authority. I don't do arrangements, Richard. I do math. You took 15 million. The interest has made it 20. You have nothing left to give me but your life. I have her, my father blurted out, gesturing wildly toward the fireplace. Roman slowly turned his head. Sarah was trembling so violently that the ice in the nearby bucket rattled. She tried to offer a seductive, demure smile, but it looked like a grimace of pure terror. She stepped forward, her thin, delicate legs shaking. This is my daughter Serafina, my father said, adopting the tone of a salesman pitching a luxury car. She is 22, educated in Switzerland, flawless pedigree, untouched. She would make the perfect mafia wife, Roman. She's beautiful, compliant, and she comes with the Gallagher name. Marry her. Take her as your own and wipe the debt clean. The silence that followed was suffocating. I pressed my back harder against the wall, my heart hammering against my ribs. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, watching my own father auction off his child like a piece of meat. Roman stared at Sarah. He didn't look at her with lust or appreciation or even curiosity. He looked at her the way one might look at a dying insect. He took a slow step toward her. Sarah whimpered and shrank back. This is your offer, Roman asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. a trembling, hollow-boned porcelain doll. You think a pretty face pays off $20 million, Richard. She's highly sought after. My father stammered, the panic rising rapidly. Any man in Boston would kill to have her on his arm. I am not any man, Roman stated coldly. He reached out, grabbing Sarah's chin with one large, gloved hand. She let out a squeak of terror, tears spilling over her eyelashes. Roman tilted her head side to side, inspecting her. She's weak. She'd break the first times my world got loud. She's terrified of me. He dropped his hand in disgust and pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, wiping his gloves, as if touching her had soiled him. The deal is rejected, Richard. Wait, please. My father dropped to his knees, utterly pathetic. I don't have the money. I don't have it. Take her, sell her. I don't care. Just let me live. Bile rose in my throat. Sell her my own father. Roman sighed, a sound of profound boredom. He reached into the breast pocket of his tailored jacket. The metallic shk of a slide racking echoed through the room. Suddenly, a heavy matte black handgun was in Roman's grip. Sarah screamed, dropping to the floor and covering her head. My father began to sob, his hands raised in surrender. No, Roman, please. I couldn't stop myself. My body moved before my brain could catch up. I stepped out of the shadows of the dining room. Stop, I yelled. My voice, usually so quiet and subservient, rang out, clear and strong. Roman froze. He didn't shoot. Instead, he slowly turned his head, his slate-grey eyes locking onto me. For the first time all night, the devil looked surprised. I stood there fully exposed under the harsh glare of the chandelier. I felt massive, awkward, and entirely out of place in my cheap navy dress, my thick thighs trembling, my heavy chest heaving with panicked breaths. I felt every extra pound on my frame, perfectly aware that I was no porcelain doll. I wasn't the fantasy. I was the reality. Jasper, the underboss, raised his own weapon, pointing it at me. Who the hell is this? Put it down, Jasper. Roman commanded softly, his eyes never leaving mine. Madeline, get back in the shadows, you stupid fat cow! My father shrieked from the floor, his face twisted in rage and fear. Don't ruin this! Roman's gaze flicked to my father, a muscle ticking in his jaw. Then he looked back at me. He took a slow, deliberate step in my direction. The room was dead silent, save for my father's whimpering and my own jagged breathing. Roman walked right past Sarah, ignoring her entirely. He walked right past my kneeling father. He crossed the Persian rug until he was standing less than 2 feet away from me. Up close, he smelled of rain, expensive leather, and gun oil. I had to tilt my head back to look him in the eye. And who are you? Roman asked. The coldness in his voice had shifted. It was replaced by something heavy, something intensely curious. I'm Madeline. I breathed out my hands, clutching the fabric of my dress. The oldest daughter. The accountant. Roman corrected, his eyes narrowing slightly. My breath hitched. How did he know that? I know a lot of things, Madeline Gallagher, Roman murmured, leaning in just a fraction. His eyes traced the soft, round curve of my cheek, dipping down to the heavy swell of my chest before coming back up to meet my gaze. There was no disgust in his eyes. None. I know that your father couldn't use a spreadsheet if his life depended on it. I know that for the past 3 years, someone brilliant has been doctoring the books of Gallagher Freight, hiding millions of dollars in a desperate attempt to fix this idiot's mistakes. That was you, wasn't it? I swallowed hard. Yes. Roman's lips twitched into the ghost of a smile. It was a terrifying, beautiful thing. He offered me the sister, Roman said quietly, the gun still resting casually in his hand. He told me he was giving me his most valuable asset. Suddenly Roman moved. In a blur of motion, he raised the heavy pistol. My heart stopped. I squeezed my eyes shut, expecting the deafening crack, expecting the pain. Instead, I felt the cold steel of the gun barrel press gently against the center of my chest, resting right between my breasts. I opened my eyes. Roman was staring down at me, his gaze burning with a sudden dark intensity. "He was wrong," Roman said, his voice projecting across the room so my father could hear every word. "I don't want the porcelain doll." Roman kept the gun pressed lightly against my chest, but his free hand reached out. His large, warm palm cupped my jaw, his thumb brushing against my full cheek. A shiver violently ripped through my body. "I want her," Roman declared. "Her," my father choked out from the floor, absolute bewilderment replacing his fear. "Madeline, but Roman, she's not." He couldn't even say it. He couldn't fathom how the most powerful man in Boston would choose his overweight, ignored daughter over the town beauty. Roman didn't look at him. He stepped closer to me, his chest almost brushing mine. The gun was still between us, a stark reminder of who and what he was. "You're coming with me, Madeline," Roman whispered, his eyes dark and possessive. "And if you say no, I pull the trigger on your father right now." The heavy oak door of my childhood home slammed shut behind us, severing me from the only life I had ever known. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't say goodbye. My father had remained frozen on the Persian rug, his mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish, while Serafina stared at me with a toxic mixture of shock and sudden venomous jealousy. For 22 years, I was the joke of the Gallagher family. Tonight, the most dangerous man in New England had walked over her to get to me. Roman's hand remained firmly on the small of my back as we descended the front steps. His touch burned through the cheap fabric of my navy dress. Outside, a fleet of black SUVs idled in the chilling Boston air, their headlights cutting through the fog rolling in from the harbor. Jasper opened the rear door of the lead Maybach. He didn't look at me with the usual disdain I expected from men. He looked at me with wary, calculated respect. I was no longer the invisible fat girl. I was the boss's chosen property. I slid into the leather interior, the scent of rich mahogany, and Roman's intoxicating cedarwood cologne wrapping around me. Roman slid in beside me, the sheer size of him making the spacious cabin suddenly feel suffocatingly small. He didn't say a word as the convoy pulled away from Beacon Hill, leaving my father's fake, crumbling empire in the rearview mirror. "Why?" The word tumbled from my lips before I could stop it. I kept my hands folded tightly over my stomach, an old defensive habit, trying to hide my curves. "Why me? You could have had her. You could have had anyone." Roman reached over his large fingers, gently but firmly, prying my hands away from my stomach. He interlaced his fingers with mine, resting our joined hands on the soft, thick flesh of my thigh. "Serafina is a liability," Roman stated, his voice a low, soothing rumble in the dark car. "A pretty face who would shatter under the pressure of my world. I don't need a decoration, Madeline. I need a partner. A survivor. But I swallowed the lump in my throat, my insecurities screaming at me. "I'm not a mafia wife. I'm just the fat accountant who hides in the pantry." Roman turned his head, his slate-grey eyes catching the amber glow of the passing streetlights. "You are the woman who outsmarted the IRS, the FBI, and my own forensic accountants for 3 years. Do you think I just stumbled blindly into your father's house tonight?" I stared at him, my heart skipping a beat. 6 months ago, I started tracking the missing money. Roman explained, a dangerous smirk playing on his lips. I noticed a brilliant ghost-like signature manipulating the wire transfers through the Cayman Islands and shell corporations in Delaware. Whoever was doing it was a genius. They were keeping Gallagher Freight alive entirely on paper, moving phantom funds faster than my men could trace them. It took me 4 months to realize Richard was too stupid to execute it. It took me another month to trace the IP addresses back to your upstairs study. He shifted closer, the heat of his body radiating against my side. I didn't come to your house tonight to collect a debt from your father, Madeline. I came to collect you. The debt was just the leverage I needed to pry you out of that toxic house. My mind reeled. He had been watching me, studying me, and my weight, I whispered, hating how vulnerable I sounded. My father said, "Your father is a dead man walking who traded on illusions." Roman interrupted his voice, dropping to a fierce, possessive growl. He reached up his knuckles, brushing against my cheek, trailing down my neck to rest heavily on my collarbone. I like my women real, Madeline. I like softness. I like substance. You carry yourself like a queen who forgot she wears a crown because a peasant convinced her she was ugly. I am going to remind you exactly what you are worth. We arrived at a towering, heavily fortified high-rise in the Seaport district. The entire penthouse floor belonged to Roman. It was a fortress of floor-to-ceiling, bulletproof glass, dark marble, and cold, calculated luxury. Over the next few weeks, the reality of my new life set in. I was a captive, yes, but I had never felt so painfully free. Roman didn't lock me in a room. He gave me the master access codes to his financial servers. He didn't force me to diet. He hired a private chef who cooked decadent, incredible meals, and Roman would sit across from me, watching me eat with a dark, satisfied hunger in his own eyes that had nothing to do with food. He touched me with reverence. He worshipped the heavy curves of my hips and the thick softness of my thighs. Every time I tried to hide in the shadows, Roman pulled me into the light. But a mafia empire is built on blood, and peace is always a temporary illusion. It was a Tuesday night, exactly 1 month after I had left my father's house, when I found the discrepancy. I was sitting in Roman's private study, wrapped in one of his oversized cashmere sweaters, scrolling through the encrypted offshore ledgers of the Delgado Syndicate. Roman was out at a sit-down with the O'Connor family, a violent, old-blood Irish crew operating out of Southie. The O'Connors, led by a ruthless patriarch named Declan O'Connor, had been encroaching on Roman's docks. As I cross-referenced the Port Authority payoffs, a chill ran down my spine. The numbers weren't adding up. There was a leak, a massive one. Millions of dollars were being systematically siphoned from Roman's operational funds and funneled into a blind trust. The coding signature on the transfers was sloppy, but it was familiar. It was the same crude routing methodology my father had used before I took over his books. My fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard, breaking through the firewall of the blind trust. The ownership documents flashed on the screen, and the air left my lungs. The trust belonged to Richard Gallagher, but it was co-signed by Declan O'Connor, and the internal access codes used to bypass Roman security could have only come from one person, Jasper. Jasper, Roman's trusted second-in-command, was selling him out. They were pooling the stolen money to fund a hit on Roman tonight at the sit-down, and my father was helping launder the cash to buy back his freedom and Serafina's status. Panic clawed at my throat. I grabbed my encrypted phone and hit Roman's speed dial. Ring, ring, ring! Pick up, Roman. I prayed, my heavy chest heaving. Pick up, Madeline. Roman's voice came through calm and steady, though I could hear the faint murmur of hostile voices in the background. I am in the middle of a negotiation. It's a trap, I breathed out rapidly. Jasper is the leak. He's working with my father and Declan O'Connor. They've drained the West Side accounts to hire outside shooters. Roman, they aren't negotiating. They are keeping you in that room until the hitmen arrive. Silence stretched over the line. A terrifying, absolute silence. Are you certain? Roman asked. His voice had lost all warmth. It was the voice of the executioner. I am looking at the routing numbers right now. Get out of there. Stay in the penthouse. Lock down the servers. Roman ordered. The line went dead. The next 3 hours were an agonizing purgatory. I paced the marble floors, my thick thighs brushing together, my heart threatening to hammer out of my ribcage. I realized in that terrifying quiet that I didn't just fear losing my protector. I had fallen in love with the monster who had finally seen me. At exactly 2 a.m., the private elevator chimed. I froze as the steel doors slid open. Roman stepped out. His Tom Ford suit was ruined, splattered with dark crimson stains. His knuckles were bruised, and a shallow cut traced his jawline. But his slate-grey eyes were ablaze with dark, triumphant fire. He was alive. I let out a choked sob and ran to him. I didn't care about the blood. I threw my heavy arms around his neck, burying my face in his chest. Roman dropped his gun onto the console table and wrapped his arms fiercely around my waist, lifting me off my feet, despite my size, burying his face in my neck. "It's done," Roman murmured against my skin, his chest heaving. "Declan O'Connor is dead. Jasper is at the bottom of the harbour." He set me down slowly, keeping his large hands firmly on my waist. He looked at me, a profound, dangerous awe in his eyes. "You saved my empire tonight, Madeline. You saved my life." "My father," I whispered, dread pooling in my stomach. Roman's jaw tightened. "Your father is currently detained in my basement alongside your sister. They tried to run when they heard the O'Connors fell." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy iron key, pressing it into my palm. "In my world, treason is met with a bullet," Roman said softly. "But they are your blood. So the choice is yours, my queen. You tell me what happens to them, and it is done." I stood there, the cold key biting into my flesh. I thought about the decades of emotional abuse. I thought about the forced diets, the insults, the way my father had offered Serafina as a prize, and screamed at me to hide in the shadows. I thought about how they had conspired to murder the only man who had ever treated me like I was made of magic. I looked up at Roman, the man who had pointed his gun at me, not to threaten me, but to claim me. I straightened my spine, letting my full, heavy body take up all the space it deserved in this grand room. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the glittering skyline of Boston. I opened my hand and let the heavy iron key drop from my fingers. It landed on the marble floor with a sharp, final clack. "I don't have a family," I said, coldly turning back to the mafia boss who had made me his equal. "Do what you have to do, Roman, but don't get blood on the new rugs." Roman Delgado smiled, a dark, wicked, entirely devoted smile. He crossed the room, pulling me against his chest, claiming my lips in a bruising, fiery kiss that promised a reign of absolute power. The porcelain doll was gone. The invisible fat accountant was dead. I was Madeline Delgado now, and the city was ours. Do you crave more heart-stopping drama, dark romance, and unexpected twists? If Madeline's journey from the invisible outcast to the reigning queen of the criminal underworld kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button. Don't forget to share this story with your friends who love a fierce, unapologetic heroine, and subscribe to the channel for more thrilling, real-life mafia chronicles. Drop a comment below. What would you have done to the toxic